Hey guys, it's me Rodney at Rustic Relics, and we're going to be doing a steampunk suitcase. And the votes were in. You guys chose that I was going to do a transfer, some decoupage, and a dadgum stencil. So that's a lot. So we're going to get started here in just a moment, but I want to go over the paints we're going to be using today. We're going to be using drop cloth. All right, I got a 32-ounce container of that just in case I make a bunch of mistakes. Got pine cone. That's going to be my intermediate color that goes in between. We're going to do an ombre effect on here. And we're going to do some chocolate. That's going to be for my dark browns that's going to go around the suitcase. The transfer that I'm using is the Steampunk transfer by Dixie Belle Paint Company. It's really cool. It's got a lot of cool little graphics going along with it. The silkscreen stencil, I think I'm going to be using the Steampunk gears from the Dixie Belle Steampunk selection. I may end up using a clock. It's really cool too. And I would use the key, but I think it's a little much for what we're trying to get on today. But this is by Dixie Belle as well, silkscreen stencils. And lastly, for my decoupage, let me hold it up against the white. I chose this bird design. I got it from a Etsy seller. She drew this, and then I can use it as decoupage. I printed it out on rice paper, so it's really thin, and it'll go on really good with the Mod Podge or the little glue stuff that I'm going to use. And that's about it. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm going to be using copper gilding wax, bronze gilding wax, and gold gilding wax. Now the copper we're going to use with the silkscreen stencil instead of paint. So that's going to be really cool. It's going to give it a really neat effect. And then you'll see how I use it throughout the video. I'll pause and discuss exactly what to do when I'm doing these things. And that's about it. We're going to get started, okay? All right, guys, the first thing I've noticed when I opened my putty paint is that we've opened it before, and I didn't realize, I thought this was a brand new jar, but it's gotten really thick consistency. See that? Almost like Jello pudding. And what we want to do is we want to get it thinned down. So we're going to have to take our time and just keep squirting some with the continuous mist sprayer, or just if you have some distilled water in a jug on hand, add it to it. But this is distilled water I got in a mister because I don't want it to contaminate my paint with, you know, chlorine and all that junk. So we'll just keep stirring until we get it totally emulsified. If you have an emulsifier blender that you can stick down in there, that works really well for this. I prefer to do it by hand though, so I can make sure that I get the right consistency and I don't have to worry about it getting frothy at the top. All right, we're gonna fast forward through this section. All right, guys, what we're doing now is I've got it almost to where we need it to be. And you wanna stir kind of slowly, but thoroughly. Okay, because you wanna mix it up really good, and you wanna control it, make sure you don't knock any of the dried stuff off the edge of the rim inside the canister if you have any, which I don't have very much on this one. I cleaned it off pretty good beforehand. But I'm going to show you about the consistency I'm looking back for. Now see how it just runs off the paint stick? That's what I'm looking for. So now we can get started with painting. And I'm going to be using the oval medium brush like I said earlier. And we should have a lot of fun with this one. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be a fun learning experience. All right here we're going to go in, do our little courtesy misting spray with our continuous mister, distilled water. We're just laying on our base coat on the very top with the pine cone color. It's pretty quick and easy. So I don't want to contaminate the jar drop cloth, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my paint stick down in there, and I'm just going to get some. I'm going to drop it right dead in the middle. Now this is going to be a lot different than what a lot of people is going to say. They're probably going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just did that. But that's just how I roll. I'm a little bit different. Sometimes I'm kind of goofy, but we just want to get it on there. See that? That's so cool. Missy's back here making a face. You should have seen it. It's so awesome. She's like, oh, I can't believe he did that. See, that's what I'm talking about. They're gonna say, oh, I can't believe you just did that. But, you know, you're supposed to have fun when you're doing this stuff. It's not supposed to be uptight and all that jazz. You're just supposed to have a good time, make a little paint. Make sure your decoupage paper don't get messed up. All right, now let's get on here. We're gonna kind of muddy this. Now, when you're painting on canvas, you wanna avoid getting muddy, but what we're doing here is muddying because I wanna change that drop cloth up because we need it to fit our little bird, all right? We need him to fit in the center. So we're gonna muddy our paint, get us an even tone in the middle. See how that's evening right out? That's what we want. Even tone in the middle, and then we want to start brushing our way outwards, okay, kind of overlapping. All right, guys, so it looks like I messed up. I wanted my, after looking at it, I realized that my bird was going to be this way, but I really want him to be this way. So we have to change the way we did the rough part of the highlight in the center. So we're going to do that now. All right, now we're going to speed this up the rest of the way. I used my stick like normal to add my paint, but I didn't really need to because I was painting on something dry, so that didn't matter much. I'm just expanding the oval like I said before so we can get our bird up there and make him look nice. And we'll start blending the whole thing in and making a total ombre or fade effect all around. But I switched to a different brush right here. It's a fatter one, and it allows me to just add a little bit of paint to one side of it, and I can feather with the others with the dry side, which is what I'm doing here, and it gives a really good blending. I changed my blending technique in just a moment because I decided I wanted to blend the whole thing, because when I come back, I'm going to cut back in with the pine cone to even all the colors out except for where the bird is, because most of this is just for the background for the decoupage. I really had a lot of fun doing this. It's always a challenge, especially when you don't have a clear vision in your head of what you're trying to accomplish. The only thing I knew is I wanted to use the artwork, and I wanted to use these three colors that I chose to paint with, which was pine cone, drop cloth, and chocolate. Come back in, obviously got to brush back around. But see how I'm feathering using the brush? I'm kind of doing a dry brush. I wipe it off on the side, make sure it's cleaned back up. It's a neat technique to use. Here I'm just doing my normal thing, which is go ahead and coating the rest. It's pretty self-explanatory. I don't care if I get paint on the hardware. It's gonna help me out when I go to put the Gilding wax on it, because it'll give me a chalk painted surface to paint on instead of trying to go over a smooth metal surface. Same thing here. I also made a mistake right here. I got some paint on my black handle, and I wanted to keep the leather handle black. Even though this whole suitcase is leather, I wanted to keep the handle black. So I got paint on it, and the easiest way to get paint off of it is let it dry and then come back in with a damp washcloth and wipe it, and it'll come right off. Adding in the second coat here, because I need it to be, I don't need any of that black showing through. Because even though steampunk is kind of grungy, it's also can be kind of a clean look. Specific colors, you know, like copper, bronze, gold. That's why I stuck with the tans and the chocolates. And that's why the bird he quite frankly looks really cool. The artist that did that did a really great job. She's an Etsy seller. I can try to I'll look later and I'll put it in the link in the description, just in case you're interested in checking out her stuff. Coming in with the chocolate. Notice I only taped off 1/2 of the thing, because I'm using regular masking tape and I don't want the masking tape ripping off the chalk paint, because I didn't have any painter's tape, and I use what you got. You know, just make sure if you're using regular mask tape, get it off quickly. Don't leave it on there too long, because the adhesive will go into the chalk paint and then pull it right off. Here I'm actually taping it down. I didn't mean to keep recording this part, but it's good to see how easy it really is and how quick it is. This footage in particular is only sped up 5 times, so it is actually quite quick to do that. And the next chop will come in and it'll already be taped off, because I'm going to do the rest of it. And just laying in the chocolate. Whenever you're taping off too, make sure that you use your fingernail or a straight edge or something to kind of try to tuck the tape all the way up against the edge, because you don't want to have to come back in and try to repaint against the edge because you put in your darker color, because it's easier to paint over a light color with a dark color than it is to paint over a dark color with a light color. So we want to make sure we do that and get our tape off as soon as we get done. That way it doesn't stick. And see, it's really easy. Right there it looks like I ripped some of the paint off, but that's not what happened. That's where the fabric is, where the leather had worn through, and there's some fabric because of the way they laminated it, I would assume. Anyways, I go in and I fix it. Right here I use a hooking motion with the paintbrush, and I use 2 hands to keep still so I don't accidentally touch the chocolate area with the pine cone. Then I'll just dab it into the areas like where the tear is. Here we're going to use some PPA matte. I didn't have it. We were out of Mod Podge, which is what I prefer to use because it gives you a better result faster. This works too, and it's a true top coat basically. That's an adhesive as well that you can use for decoupage. It's actually made for it, but I think Mod Podge gives you a better result. I'm just using a disposable brush, because washing adhesive down the drain is not a good idea because it can clog your pipes. Also, if you use Dixie Belle Slick Stick, don't wash it down the drain. Use a disposable brush to apply that too, because it will mess things up. In a minute, yeah, here we go. So right here we're going through with the glue, and we're making sure that we're pulling out large fibers from the rice paper, because you don't want it being you don't want too much of the large fibers in there, because they actually stick up. So what I'm doing is going with my finger and pulling it out. Missy's doing the same thing, helping me. You know, she's just finding areas as she can see them. And see, right now I'm pointing out some areas that I want to make sure I cover, and I'm explaining to Missy what I'm doing there. And I'm coming back in with a pine cone is what I'm talking about. And I'm going to dab it across. I'm going to brush it on and dab it back towards. So we're removing the ombre, which again, that was planned because the ombre was just for the bird. I'm coming back in with the pine cone. I'm going to start dabbing with my other brush. Right now I'm using the flat brush, doing the hook edge thing, getting real close so I can make sure I cover up all the black. All right, I used the other brush, and this is a cheap brush I got off Amazon. In a minute, you'll see why you don't want to use cheap brushes. I think this one was like $15. With paint brushes, you get what you pay for. I don't know how many times I got to say that, but it is the truth. You get what you pay for with paint brushes. So you just dab in just a little bit of paint, not much. You just dab it in there, and then use the dry edge of your paintbrush to start softening things back up. And if you notice, every time I take my hand off camera, it's because I'm wiping it on a paper towel. And sometimes I use regular towels because it's just chalk paint, so I can just wipe it right off. I'm trying to smooth everything back out, smooth everything back, and see, now I'm digging the hair out. And I showed you, it's a DIY Arch paintbrush. I think it was $15. The thing, I don't know. You'll see I'll go back to Dixie Belle brush right here. $15 more, and I've been using this brush for 2 years without a single problem. But look at that. See how nicely that's starting to come out? And then I'm just using this one to dab some color back in it as well. And when it dries, it's going to look really fantastic. You'll see in just a few minutes. Okay, right here is where I failed to meet the challenge. So this is my silk screen transfer gears. I'm going to go in with the gilding wax like I said, but I forgot to take account the texture of the suitcase. So it's only going to stick, the wax is only going to stick down deep enough to on the high spots. I never could get it deep enough to go into the low spots. So I struggled with this for about 30 minutes, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have to let everybody know I failed. So I did. I failed on this one. But it's a learning experience. It works on flat surfaces. This technique does not work on a textured surface. And if it does, then if somebody else can get it done, I don't know, because I couldn't get it done. And I was mad. I mean, I used a lot of copper on this and still couldn't get it through. So I picked out 2 gears that I wanted to use for the transfer. And this, I'm going to struggle with this one too because of the texture surface. Again, it's easier to get transfers and wax in the silk screen stencils on a flat surface than it is on a textured one. See, not easy peasy after all. So this is sped up 10 times. I actually spent quite a while trying to get this down in there. I'm using the very corner of the stick that comes with the Dixie Belle transfers. And you'll see I'm going to lift it up several times until I start getting some, I'm figuring out how to get it to stick. So it's not a really, I'm not mashing really super hard. What I'm having to do is just use the corner. So all the techniques that I usually use did not work for this. So I had to try something else. And see, I'm basically holding it at its very edge upright. But it's working. I'm just about to get it. And the second one's going to be much easier because I'm learning from the first one exactly how to do the second one. Because like I said, they're usually a lot easier than this. Make sure you go over it with your finger when you're done so there's no like the plastic residue from where the transfer goes down. And see, this one's just much faster because I know exactly what I was doing wrong the first time. I really enjoyed doing this actually. I wish that I would have been able to get the stencil done. It would have looked really nice. Here I'm laying in my gilding wax. I'm only going to show you me doing this one piece of the hardware because there's a lot of the hardware on there and it'll probably take 30 minutes to do it all in the video, and that's sped up. So just showing doing this one. I used an art brush that I had clipped off to make it very stiff. So I clipped most of it off towards the end of the brush, or back towards the ferrule, I should say. And I want to keep a worn appearance, so I'm really sloppily putting it on there and then smoothing it back out. I'm not using a ton of gilding wax for this, just a tiny bit. Right here I'm using gold gilding wax on a bird to bring some steampunkiness to his feathers and his beak, because you know you can't have steampunk without gold and bronze and copper. I was not able to use the bronze though. All in all, I was pretty happy with this project. I wish I'd have been able to get the stencil done. But if you like what you see, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell. And check us out on Facebook if you get a chance. Y'all have a great day.